Politics.
Time now to debate some of the big issues of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have former House Speaker Greg Hughes and former Salt Lake City Councilman Charlie Luke. Gentlemen, glad to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
Great to be here.
Let's get right into the legislative session. Greg, your former colleagues wrapping that up during the week. What do you think are some of the best things they did during the 45-day session?
Well, I got to tell you that it's a good thing this thing only lasts 45 calendar days because it was time to land this plane. It's getting ugly out there. They're gonna put an eye out if they kept going. So it was good that they finished Friday night at midnight. Big things, a lot of good funding. There's a lot of surplus this year, so a lot of unaddressed needs in the past. Saw some maybe record funding. Public education came out a winner in terms of its funding and the commitment to public education. And you could really argue across the board, higher ed, even health and human services, a lot of those issues, critical issues, saw what we call ongoing funding, which is pretty good for the state. It positions the state in a very good way. Charlie, your thoughts? Some of the hits from the legislative session.
I agree. I mean, I think that there was so much money this session that a lot of stuff that have been worked on in the past, we were able to actually fund this year. One of the things I worked on with former speaker was disability provider rates, and the legislature funded that to the tune of $24 million, which equates to about a $4 an hour increase for disability providers. So that is just one example of of something that you won't hear when you're talking about the legislative session, but one of the things that has been really good and very needed for a long time.
All right, let's get into some of the misses from your perspective, Greg. Where did they not do what you would like to have seen?
Early in the session too, they cut taxes, which is also something you don't hear when you see the funding that happened. Here's a miss. In a time where they were providing, I think, record funding for public schools, you have a lot of parents that are frustrated over the last 3 years, COVID, even curriculum that's being taught inside our schools. So there was an important bill, the Hope Scholarship Fund. And it didn't just not pass, it was pretty much drubbed in the House of Representatives. It only received 22 votes out of 75 members. A lot of disappointed parents. I think parents are looking for some educational options right now. They're asking lawmakers to fund students and not systems particularly. I think that was a big miss.
Let me ask you this though, where do we stand as a whole here in the state of Utah as far as the court of public opinion on this? Because as you mentioned, the vote was not close, and then you go back to the referendum on the vouchers, several years ago, that was not close either.
Well, on the devil's in the details, this bill, it actually sent the funding for a student that would have opted to not go to the public school. It was sending that funding to the school anyway. So the worry that it would take money from public education, the last amended bill was actually going to bolster funding because they were going to fund the weighted pupil unit of a student that would go elsewhere.
But do you think more people support this idea now?
No.
Okay, Charlie, get into that.
No, I think that the bill did not pass. It's worth a discussion. I agree that I think there were a lot of frustrated parents, but I don't know if this was necessarily the solution. I think that it was good that the discussion happened, but the fact that it did not pass by a sizable margin is fairly indicative of the support that it did.
Okay, here's one thing I know. It's not going away. It's going to continue in some form to move forward. Charlie, your misses from the legislative session.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was a lot of power consolidation. I don't think that was necessarily a miss, but I think that is something that we're going to have to that we will have to deal with. I am of the opinion that a much stronger legislative. I'm a legislative guy as opposed to an executive guy, so I'm not as bothered by it. But I do think that cutting access to the press on the House floor and the Senate floor is problematic. I don't think that it's going to solve a problem as much as the perception that it creates.
Greg, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that there were some bills. I mean, you saw a member of the public attend a Senate hearing, having the first three words of the preamble of our Constitution, "We the People," on his T-shirt, and I think a sticker that said, "Please support HB 60," removed from that committee by law enforcement. And I thought that was a misstep. And I think it goes to what Charlie just described. We got to be, I mean, we're already in tense times. We don't have to find ways to make it even harder. And the public that takes time to come to a hearing, media access, I think we got to try and communicate to the public as best we can right now. And I would think that the legislature would want to, that would be the hill they'd want to fight in terms of transparency and not some of the things we saw.
When you talk about some of the power consolidating, I thought maybe you were referring to the city versus the state legislature dynamic that we saw. We saw the mask mandates overturned at the beginning. We saw changes to the board of the inland port. Charlie, your thoughts on what we saw play out there?
Well, I don't think there's anything new. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. I think that, the legislature, especially when there are, fundamental disagreements between the state and the city is always going to end up losing. And I think that, with legislation this year, I know that there was, a lot of consensus on it, but the devil's in the details, and I think what had been previously negotiated was actually stronger for the city than what we.
Greg, did you like? Did you like what you see?
I'm
play out
laughing
there?
because you got a couple of old war horses here who actually did that negotiation as a city council member and a former speaker. So we were kind of in that. So we might like what we actually agreed upon and don't know why they're ruining it now. But look, they are changing the board. But here's an important detail. The tax increment, that is the city's property tax increment, is also being redirected to the city to be able to use, and I think that was the trade in terms of it has a member on the board representing that area, but they're a non-voting members. So I'm not worried about that per se, but yeah, that's one of the things. I think the mask issue. I think that when you had you're seeing this nationally now. You're seeing people say, look, I don't know that this COVID-19 is really adhering to CDC best practices or whatever laws people would like to pass. This thing has been pretty prevalent in terms of spreading per 100,000 people, whether you're in a strict restrictive state or a state like Florida. So I think the easing of those restrictions, it was due to it was time to do that.
Charlie, real quick.
Yeah, the easing of those restrictions. I don't know what the Republicans are going to run on in November because they've created this culture war about everything, and so now that masks are not being used, I don't know what they're going to run on. Who's DeSantis going to yell at? Other than a bunch of kids.
Okay, I want to dig into that more, but we're going to have to move on. Let's get to the latest ABC Washington Post poll. President Biden down to 37% approval. That's down from 41 in just November. Take a look at the numbers here real quick and tell me, Greg, why are they so low?
So Charlie asked, what are Republicans going to run on? What you're looking at by way of poll numbers is exactly what all Republicans are going to run on, because this has been a common theme that President Biden's approach of dismantling some of our core institutions in this country, whether it be our border security, whether it be our public schools, public safety, we're all feeling it. We're all feeling it in every state. These are statistics and outcomes that are happening. Anyone can ask themselves, am I better off today than I was just 14 months ago? And the answer to most everyone is no. That's why you see 37% approval rating only. This is what you'll see Republicans running on, is that these ideas, these principles, this philosophy that's been taken by President Biden and the Democrat Party nationally and in our state doesn't represent the everyday hardworking people of the country, and it's disconnected. It's the elite, and I think that's what they'll run on.
Charlie, those are historically low approval numbers.
Greg was right in what he said if he would have said it a week ago. What has happened since that poll was taken was the State of the Union and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Regardless of what you think of Biden, regardless of how far down the MAGA rabbit hole we want to go, the fact of the matter is what Joe Biden has been able to do this week has been unprecedented on the international stage. We have a situation where the president has unified NATO. He has unified the European Union. And it was only a couple weeks ago that we did see the coronavirus riots, that we did see all of the other problems that were taking place in Europe. Our previous president spent years trying to weaken both Ukraine and the NATO system. And so I think that Joe Biden's and his approval ratings should increase. I think they will increase. The reality is the international response would not have been the same without Joe Biden's leadership.
Okay, Greg, your thoughts on that? Did the president do anything to turn that around with the State of the Union and the way he's handling the Russia-Ukraine situation?
Not at all. In fact, it's a two-way street. You heard a little bit from Charlie just now invoking the name of Trump. Again, if this was happening on Trump's watch in terms of this Russian invasion, sadly, you would see Democrats talking more about Trump than they would the Ukrainian people. Republicans want to see Ukraine and its people defended. It is tearing at our hearts to watch what's happening you take a leader like Zelensky and you look at him in the camo, and he's not giving up and he's not going to cave. And then you look and you compare within weeks someone like Justin Trudeau and the Prime Minister in Canada, who with honking horns of truckers went into hiding with his family. The contrast in leadership between whether it's the Democrats, Justin Trudeau, versus the heroism we're seeing in Ukraine, I think it's the Ukrainians that are really uniting people around the world and in this country.
About 15 seconds left for you, Charlie.
Less than 3 years ago, Donald Trump was impeached for withholding congressionally approved aid, military aid to Ukraine. You know, we can pretend, you know, this new, you know,
Trump.
The next thing we're going to hear is that Trump was, you know, Josh
I need to double the
news
time on this segment to like 20 minutes. We'll have to do that and invite you both back sometime. We've run out of time.
These segments are too short.
They are.
They are.
I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside